Shalom. Call Halayimla Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rakaha Kodash. Double honors to the beloved apostles and elders of Great Millstone, better known as GMS, who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect, the tabernacle of David, started with 144,000, and the rest of the men, women, and children out of the 12 tribes, whom Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai will ultimately have mercy upon. This is your brother Matazabath from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Melbourne, Australia. And I just wanted to do a land back off this interview, all right, off of the beloved Elder Karatazah from GMS Vegas Sit Downs 144K. All right, subscribe so that you may be edified. Now, this video has been circulating around between the apostles and elders on down, all right? And each video just keeps getting better and better with edification and exhortation. And the Spirit hopped on me to add some more edification out of this video because, see, you know, when you deal with this particular Israelite camp, such as IUIC, it has become more clear and evident now, if it hasn't been more clear and evident in times past, but even more so now, that there is an agenda, all right, that they're trying to reach. And it becomes a problem when you start adding to the scripture, all right, and also taking away from the scriptures. Now, I'm going to play a little bit of this segment here so that you can hear it, all right, in case if you didn't see the video, for all of you newcomers, all right. But I'm going to play this video, and then I'm actually going to bring out some context dealing with the word polygyny, all right, in the ancient world, and then just give a few precepts pertaining to, you know, how the Heavenly Father actually allowed polygyny. And it wasn't so much he was against it. He actually allowed for it, because even as the beloved Elder Apostle Gabar once said in the video that he did off of this situation here, is the fact that when you deal with the word woman in general, the word woman itself goes back to a female servant. And according to the law in Genesis, the 3rd chapter, what was the woman subjected to? She was to be subjected unto her husband, which means she is to serve her husband. All right. So it doesn't matter whether that man has one servant of a female, 2, 3, or 4. They are all serving him under one roof, man. All right. They are all, you know, under his order. All right. And the issue that a lot of people are having is guys like this, who you are about to hear from, one of the captains from IUIC, is that they'll try to twist the scriptures, as they like to say. We twist the scriptures, and other, you know, Christians for that matter, who don't understand the overall volume of the book of the Bible. But they'll sit up here and they'll say we're twisting scriptures, but yet they'll use scriptures out of context to try to prove their point as to why they believe that the Messiah said that we only supposed to have one woman. And that's not what Yahweh Shai was alluding to. All right. But let's see what this guy has to say.
With regards to the wives, I find it a pity, you know, a great man such as yourself should be limited to one wife. It really is a pity. But are you saying that in your doctrine, it is a sin to have more than one wife?
So according to the Bible will say that we are supposed to have one. So it would be outside of God's commandments, which would cause it to be a sin. Absolutely.
So now that's the issue we here at Great Millstone are having, because for all of you, you know, followers of IUIC that come on our comment boards and say GMS is always has something negative to say about IUIC, GMS is a bunch of bullies, GMS is always getting on their brothers and stuff like that, there's no love. First and foremost, this is love, okay? Because part of love is rebuking thy neighbor so that you don't suffer sin upon them. All right. And the scriptures tells us, to rebuke before all so that others may fear. Because, see, we are not supposed to strive to, the scripture says, let's get James. And I always bring this out, the first chapter. James, the third chapter, Salakia. And I'm going to read this in the Amplified version, all right, because it hits heavy. And this is the first verse. It says, not many of you should become teachers serving in an official teaching capacity. My brothers and sisters, for you know that we who are teachers will be judged by a higher standard because we have assumed greater accountability and more condemnation if we teach incorrectly. All right. And see, yes, I blame this captain from IUIC because he didn't do his due diligence to do his own study and research of the scriptures. He doesn't have the spirit of the Church of Berea within him to lead aside from what he's been taught from his deacons and bishops of the IUIC, mainly dealing with Bishop Nathaniel. All right. And you guys are going to be responsible for the doctrine that you're pushing forward, because that's not the doctrine of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Right. So let me take it back a little bit.
A great man such as yourself should be limited to one wife. It really is a pity. But are you saying that in your doctrine, it is a sin to have more than one wife?
So according to the Bible would say that we are supposed to have one. So it would be outside of God's commandments, which would cause it to be a sin. Absolutely. It would be adultery. That's what adultery is. Adultery is when you sleep with a woman that's not your wife or that's either married to another man.
See, I think that's what I always heard.
Well, that's okay. So by that logic, because sex is marriage. OK, what do we mean here at Great Millstone when we say sex is marriage? What consummates a marriage? Sex. What does it mean to consummate? It means to basically sum up. All right. To bring together. Right. Oh, what? You thought that by the time you say I do and you sign the paperwork, you're officially married? No, man. You have to take your woman into what the ancient world called it back then, known as the bedchamber, which today we call it the what? The honeymoon. All right. Because you will be going for a full moon cycle. All right. And you will pop your woman to seal the marriage. Look that up. That's why you have the modern terminology we like to say, pop her cherry. You see? So adultery is not you sleeping with a woman that's not your wife. OK, because what happened in, let's get Genesis real quick, the 29th chapter. And actually, no, Genesis 26, I think it is. Salakia. Is it Genesis 26 or Genesis 24? Yeah, I think it's Genesis 24, right? All right, so this is Genesis 24, and let's read it in the AMP, verse 67. Then Isaac brought her, meaning Rebekah, into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah in marriage, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Therefore, Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So what is this insinuating? What does it mean he took Rebekah in his mother's tent? Does it mean that he gathered both their sides of the family around his mother's tent, and then they did a ceremony in that tent, and then he said, I do, you may now kiss your bride, and this, that, and the third? No, that's not what it's talking about. Because when you look up the Hebrew word for took in this context, all right,
Strong's H 3947. Lakach.
all right, it says here to take, get, fetch, laid hold of, siege, receive, acquire, buy, bring, marry, take a wife, snatch. OK, which really it goes into when it talks about, taking, fetching, it goes into having intercourse. And to prove that, when you go into the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon, when you see this here, it says conceive of female, impregnate. Okay. That's it's right there. So you will go into you take the woman, and once again, to consummate the marriage, you will what? Have intercourse. All right. That's how you would get to know her. That's why when you read in the King James Bible, it will say things like, and let's say, for instance, when you get Genesis, the 4th chapter, it said Adam knew Eve, right? Let's get it in the KJV. Genesis 4:1, and Adam knew Eve, his wife. What does it mean? To knew, meaning he had what? Let's read it in another translation. Let's get in the NLT this time. Now, Adam has sexual relations with his wife. That's what it means to know her. To get well acquainted with your woman, you have to what? You have to get in. You have to get in there. Right? See what you're working with. Inside joke, right? So she only becomes your wife when you pop her, man. So when he said that, let's take it back, because I want him to say it. I'm not trying to put words in this dude's mouth.
It is a sin to have more than one wife.
So according to the Bible would say that we are supposed to have one. So it would be outside of God's commandments, which would cause it to be a sin. Absolutely. It would be adultery. That's what adultery is. Adultery is when you sleep with a woman that's not your wife, or that's either married to another man.
Okay, so if you're going to say in that context, you should qualify that. And the reason why I said he should have qualified that is because if you're going to sit there and say from the perspective of committed adultery, if you're going to say adultery is committed by when a man sleeps with a woman that's not his wife, right? Well, what if she's single? Then what? See, this is why we are taught here at Great Millstone by our beloved apostles, bishops, and elders on down, that when you teach, you must qualify the things that you say, man. Okay, you have to qualify the things that you say. So you should have qualified that by saying, look, adultery is when a man, because see, when the host asked that question, and I agree, Apostle Tahar brought it out, he cornered this dude. And you got cornered. Because now that forces you to say, listen, a true adultery, according to the Bible, is when a man sleeps with another man's wife. It does not say that if a man is already married and he sees another young, pretty thing on the side that she's not dealing with no other man, if he goes into her, guess what? She now becomes his wife. So when you say when a man sleeps with a woman that's not his wife, or watch what he says. Let me take it back a little bit.
Cause it to be a sin. Absolutely. It will be adultery. That's what adultery is. Adultery is when you sleep with a woman that's not your wife, or that's either married to another man.
You see that? Wrong. He said that is not your wife, or that's even married to another man. You know, because now you got to qualify that. Right? Now, these guys love to hop on the laws, the statutes and commandments. The laws, statutes, and commandments. Well, what does it say in our law? Let's put this back on the KJV. Let's go to Exodus, the 21st chapter. Exodus 21:7. And now this is dealing with ordinances for the people, right? Because remember, you could buy a Hebrew servant, whether that be a man or a woman. Now, what would happen if you was a father, and let's say you had 2 daughters or whatever, and you fell on bad times, and you had to end up selling one of your daughters off as to another Israelite man? Now, watch this. This is Exodus 21:7. It says, and if a man sell his daughter to be a maid servant, that's the key word. What is a maid servant? We're going to look that up in just a sec. But in continuation of this, it says, she shall not go out as the men servants do, because there was a difference between if you had a male servant versus if you had a maid servant. Now, when you go into the Hebrew word for maid servant, All right. And remember, this is a Hebrew Israelite that sells his daughter off to another Hebrew Israelite. OK. Now it says here in the outline of Salaki, let me play this real quick.
Strong's H 519. Amah.
All right. So outline biblical usage says maid servant, female slave, maid, handmaid, concubine. You see that? Concubine, man, is very simple. OK. That's what a handmaid or a maid servant is. She's a concubine at the end of the day. All right. Now, let's see here in a Jacinius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon says a handmaid, female slave. Thy handmaid, used even by a free woman when speaking to her superiors. Son of a handmaid, a slave. Let's see, utterly unworthy of attention is the idea that a handmaid is derived. Okay. So it doesn't give us much from that standpoint, but let me see here. Let me get Exodus 21:7. And let's see. Right. Applied to concubine. You see that? And when you go down, there's the precept we're reading it from. So it's applied in this context to a concubine. Okay. So again, according to the law, let's see what else it says. Let me read in the NLT. Exodus 21:7. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she will not be freed at the end of 6 years as the men are. Right. So selling her off as a slave or selling her off as a maid servant. Let's see what it says in the Amplified. Yeah, female servant. All right. So so this is the importance of looking up words, man. All right. So your daughter will fall as a concubine. All right. Or potentially another wife to a man who would take off her. They showed you that in the movie Color Purple. You see that? Go back and watch the movie Color Purple. They showed you that, man. Now, when you continue to read on, all right, verse 10, we're going to drop down. If her master, the Hebrew Israelite, marries another wife. Why does it say marries another wife? Because he already had a first wife. OK, it says he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her privilege as a wife. And that's talking about the first wife. Right now, let me see if I get it. Let me see what the BBE says. Nah, it doesn't say much, but let's see. Let's get it in see what the NLT. There it is right there. NLT. If a man who has married a slave wife takes another wife for himself. So now he's up two. He must not neglect the rights of the first wife to food, clothing, and sexual intimacy. Right. Because what you do for one woman, all right, you have to and equal or equality do for the other woman. You have to have a balance. You just because you bring in a new entity into the household. All right. You can't just do all for that new booty, excuse my language, and then you don't do anything for your first wife. This is in the law. All right. Since you guys want to hop on the laws, the statutes and commandments, this is in the law. So I would love to see you guys do a breakdown to Exodus 21 verses 7 all the way down to verse 10 and 11. All right. I'm just pointing this out right now. Something else also caught my attention with all of this. And I looked this up. This is from a website called Christianity.stakeexchange.com. And it says, why did God allow polygamy in the Old Testament? Now, key thing, all right, especially to you newer brothers. when you deal with the word polygamy, let's get some understanding. The word polygamy, that refers to a man having multiple women, or vice versa, a woman having multiple men, which the Heavenly Father was never down with. Okay. The word that should actually be there is polygyny, which only refers to men having multiple women. That's the word that should be in there, not polygamy. Polygamy is going off because that not just deals with the men having multiple women, but it also deals with the women having multiple men. So it says the question of which should be there, polygyny, is an interesting one in that most people today view polygyny nowadays as immoral, while sacred scriptures nowhere explicitly condemns it. So when he said that it is looked upon as sin, you're adding to the scriptures, because it's not looked up. It is nowhere in the scriptures that said that it's unlawful for you to have multiple women, man. You see? So this is why you have to try the spirit by the spirit. Now it says the scriptures do not specifically say why the Most High allowed polygyny. As we speculate about the Most High's silence, there is at least one key factor to consider. Due to patriarchal societies, it was nearly impossible for an unmarried woman to provide for herself, and women were often uneducated and untrained, and women relied on their fathers, brothers, and husbands for provision and protection. Now, we're not comparing back then to now, because obviously in modern times, things are much different. We understand that. That's why we say all things are lawful, but not expedient, meaning just because it may be lawful to be with to be with multiple women, it doesn't mean that it's profitable for you in this day and age. All right. But to each his own, man. All right. Because if you are a brother and you can sustain that, then, hey, that's your prerogative, man. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not going off by doing that. But anyway, it says unmarried women were often subjected to prostitution and slavery. And see, also, this is key, because does it not also say within our law that thou shalt not prostitute thy daughters within the land? So if you were an Israelite man, Salakia, if you were an Israelite man and you couldn't marry off your daughter, all right, that was looked down upon in ancient Israel, because women back then, their sole purpose was to marry and to bring forth children. All right. So that they can bring substance to that man who they end up getting with. You see? It says the Old Testament allows polygyny, but doesn't encourage it. All right. And when they say doesn't encourage it, the apostle already went into this, because people will try to pull out Deuteronomy, the 17th chapter, where it talks about thou shalt not multiply as a king. You should not multiply women upon yourself, which Elder Apostle Tahar already broke that down. That wasn't talking about if you take on a second wife or a third wife. Really, when you go into it, and I even looked it up myself, is actually speaking about increasing greatly. All right. Which King Solomon was an example of that, because he had 1,000 women, man. OK, but it says great men such as Abraham, Israel, Judah, Gideon, Samson, David, Solomon had multiple wives, though the Old Testament records or records many problems that resulted. However, the law actually made it mandatory in one circumstance. If a married man died without leaving a male heir, his brother was required to marry his widow, regardless of whether he already had a wife. So Israel united in Christianity, as the beloved Elder Malcolm likes to always say. What do you guys have to say about that law, which is known as the kinsmanship? OK, when the scriptures speak about if your brother, let's say you had a brother and he passed away not having a male heir. OK, it would be that you will come up in his stead, and you will have to take his wife, who's now a widow, even though you got your own woman, right? And you will raise up seed in honor of your brother, man. In honor of your brother, right? Because that was honorable. But if you didn't take up his woman, then, you know, the elders from the village, they would cast a shoe at you. And I believe also, according to the custom, they would spit at you or something to that effect. So read about that. Once again, you guys always want to talk about the laws, the statutes and commandments, right? But see, we don't see, y'all don't go deep into these things, man, because that was mandatory in the law. If you had a brother who was married, but unfortunately he didn't have children, such even to go so far as bringing up a male-born son, and if he passed away, it was called the kinship, the redeemer, kinsman redeemer, Salakia. It was called the kinsman redeemer. And you had to bring up seed by taking his wife in. So what would happen in that situation? What is it that you teach your congregation that if going back once again to the law, how would you break that down? So I'm just adding, you know, more edification. I'm just coming a different way because we really trying to figure out what the F is going on over there in IUIC, man. Why is this so hard we keep having to get on you guys about this, man? It says this was so that she would have support during her old age, either from her new husband or from her son, and so that the family name and land would be passed on. Polygyny was also allowed in other circumstances, and the only restriction was that you shouldn't marry two sisters. And that was the only restriction, because that goes back to Leah and Rachel. And then Leah's handmaids and Rachel's handmaids, man. That's why the scriptures tells you when you get the Apocrypha, and we'll close out. Let's get Ecclesiasticus. What is it, 25 or 20? Yeah. Ecclesiasticus 26:6, it says, but a grief of heart and sorrow is a woman that is jealous over another woman, and a scourge of the tongue which communicateth with all. All right. That's why a lot of women today, and when I say women, I really should say Western women. All right. Because, you know, if you get a woman from the East, she's already brought up within this ancient custom, man, knowing that her husband can have multiple women. But it's more so women brought up in Western societies, because I also looked that up and I typed in Western society practice monogamy. And this is the results. It says, yes, Western societies generally practice and promote monogamy as the normative form of marriage and intimate relationships, although its historical and cultural roots are complex and not universally practiced. And this is the reason why a lot of women, they have a hard time dealing with the concept of the truth of the Bible, that their husbands can actually have more women, because really the woman in her, you know, not being in her right mind, you really being selfish, because you think that he's only supposed to be tied down to you. There's no such thing as him being tied down to you. You're supposed to get on his level. You're serving him. You're adding to his substance. Right? Now, let me see here. If there's anything else. Because they'll tell you, oh, this came via way of Christianity. Well, really, when you go out, and I looked this up before, it started in the ancient Roman Empire. All right, because they lost a great deal of soldiers. And so when they was trying to gather, you know, many soldiers and whatnot, for based off the history I was reading into, it said something to the effect that they brought upon the society of only dealing with one woman, enough to go around, you know, for men. They didn't want many men just pouring onto themselves multiple women, something to that effect. But you can look it up. It started with the ancient Roman Empire, when they brought into law, they made it a law for monogamous relationships to be the norm of society. Fast forward today, the ancient Roman Empire has been revived through America. So, and America is known for its practice within monogamous relationships, man. And see, our women being brought up in a Western, mindset. Once again, the scriptures is on par when it says, but a grief of heart and sorrow is a woman that is jealous of another woman. That's why, like the apostle says, your woman can sit up there and she can understand the truth and she can put a front on you all day like she gets or whatever. But deep down inside, she'll never let that shit happen. You see what I mean? And that's why Elder Apostle Gabar always says, don't worry about this side, man. Don't worry yourself over any woman, man. Because when that Isaiah 4:1 is right around the corner, man. And those of you brothers who have wives already, they not going to say anything. If the Lord puts you in that position to be in an elect men, to have to take another woman, 2 or 3 in your care during Jacob's trouble, your current woman now, she ain't going to say shit. Especially if you are a true man of the Lord. If you're, found out to be the elect, man, she ain't going to do anything on that day to gainsay anything against you. Especially when the reproach comes, man. That's what Isaiah 4:1 is all about. So, let me come back here, see if we got any more on this. Let's finish this out. It says polygyny was beneficial when the number of men was reduced by warfare. You see? It not only helped women who will otherwise be on their own, but also helped to replace the population more quickly. You see that? Replace the population more quickly, man. Because think about it, man. Your woman gets pregnant, 9 months, you wait or whatever. And then in our law, if she has a male-born son, you couldn't touch her for 40 days. And then if it was a girl, I think it was much more longer than that. Right? So guess what? You may be waiting around for her. You don't have to wait if you might have a second wife or you may have a concubine. You see what I'm saying? But once again, in Western society, this is frowned upon, man. And that's why the scripture says that you must subdue your own understanding when you come into this truth, man. That's what Yahushua meant when he told Nicodemus, you must be born again. Okay? Seek ye the old paths. Ask thy elders, thy fathers, and they shall tell thee. And we're telling you. We've been telling you, starting with the apostles, the bishops, and the elders on down, man. But Jake, hey, like I said, IUIC are Occidental Israelites, man. The word Occidental goes back to ways of the West. They're not Oriental Israelites. They don't search they don't seek to the ancient, the Eastern way. So, that's pretty much it on that. I just wanted to, bring a little bit of that information out and, approach this from a different angle to add more edification on this topic, man. All right. And it's nothing that we haven't already said before. I've done, a few videos of my own that you could look up on my YouTube channel going into a man can have multiple women. But I just wanted to go into some aspects of the law, go into a little bit of the history, man. And you see that, these dudes, they not right, man. There has to be an agenda. It has to be, man. Like, it's very simple and plain, man. You do your research for yourself, and you got to test these other camps, man, because they ain't got it. So with that, I pray that this lesson was edifying, and I want to give all praise, glory, and honor be to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakaha Kodash, and double honors to the beloved apostles and elders of Great Millstone, better known as GMS, who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect, the tabernacle of David. It's on to the next, Lord's will. Shalom.